Hey everyone. So, wow, what a day. This is going to be a time we won't soon forget. Figured the best way for me to address it would be to have a chat with Tim. So, say hi.
Hello. How about all those liberal tears?
Yes.
Well, there's all these like memes of people drinking SJW tears or whatever.
I've noticed a spike in the use of the word libtard on social media. I don't know if you have either, but you have as well. But just on, especially on Facebook, I've seen a lot of uses of that word and like comment threads in my friends' timelines and stuff that I wouldn't normally see it.
You know, I follow all the wrong people, so I've got heaps of anti-SJW type people on.
We say it all the time anyway. Yeah.
On my Twitter, and it's just like an orgy of. Someone was like, maybe we should put aside the Schadenfreude for a bit and think about what's actually going to happen.
Oh, that was the distributist. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, actually have some conversations and stuff, and then I'm pretty sure everyone else is just like, nah. Now let's just do the liberal tears thing. That's what really matters.
I haven't even been looking at what the actual proper like right wing has been saying. I'm more talking about like the people in the either who are sort of vaguely right wing or like centrist saying libtard.
Oh, I mean,
don't normally say it.
This is just like some random commenters. It's not. I don't know how indicative it is of anything, but I just randomly clicked on Richard Spencer.
I think this is I might have heard the name, but no, I don't know who that is.
He's often credited as the guy who invented the alt-right. He's like the father of the alt-right or something.
Right.
That's what people call him. So I went on his stream where he was talking about Trump winning, and he was like, "Oh, this is so great. The alt-right won. It's fantastic." And the commenter down below, because I've got live comments, was like, "I can't wait to get the smell of blacks out of the White House." And I was like,
oh. "Holy fuck!"
I was like, "Oh my god."
Yeah, Jesus fucking.
And he was scrolling through the comments, and he was like, there was one saying, "Do more streams, Richard," and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'll do more streams, yeah." And then like, "We love you, Richard," and he's like, "It's a great day, Richard." He's like, "Yeah, it's a great day." And then that one said, "Get the smell of blacks out of the White House," and he's just like, skips over that, like, "Oh great, yeah, I'll do more content and stuff." And I was like, see that one about the black stuff? Never mind.
I mean, yeah, there's no way to. Yeah, it just was a victory for the alt-right. They have won a big victory here.
But it's not just the alt-right. It's also, aren't they going to control the Congress, the presidency, probably the Supreme Court, and the Senate? So they're basically just going to have everything.
I'm more just meaning, like, can we just officially stop saying the alt-right's only on the internet at this point and shut the fuck up with that bullshit?
Well, we could stop calling them the alt-right, just call them the American right, because apparently
no, because it's important to, you know, if you're going to be data-led and look at the world empirically, you need to be able to categorize different groups of people. Otherwise, there's just no, like, how do you, in order to accurately describe the political situation and the environment, you need to be able to have terms.
But I'm saying unless the leaders fuck them over, like in some ways they fucked over the Tea Party, then they basically are the establishment right now, like these lunatics on the internet somehow.
No, they're only if you look at the actual politicians in power, there's not like a whole bunch of people who are actually like in the alt-right who are actually like in Congress or whatever. So no, it's only a victory for the alt-right. It's not like you're talking about it as if it would be some kind of 100% total takeover thing, which is not what I'm saying. I'm just saying it is a victory, you know.
Well, I think it's good that I mentioned the Tea Party then, because it reminds me a little bit of the Tea Party. Like, the Tea Party were like, "We're here, we're insane, get used to it." And then all the politicians were like, "Yeah, let's make use of all this insanity," and just kind of like drum it up. And then when they get into power, a lot of the time they just end up being sort of standard GOP establishment Republicans that fuck over. Some of them, but some of them are like legitimately
like nutbags.
Yeah, you know, and a lot of them were just like fundamentalist right-wing conservatives, sort of just taking the mantle of the Tea Party. But you look at the way they run things; it's just the same corporatist conservative drivel, really. You know,
I mean, the alt-right is more conspiratorial than traditional, than tradcons are.
Yeah,
and that's kind of scary. The amount of stuff, like, you know, like that. Oh, there's just the scroll through headlines on Breitbart. And, some of the stuff in there. That one about how women who get like on their, what is it? Oh god, it was some. There's been a whole bunch of weird stuff on there about women having their periods and stuff, and just stuff like that. Like they take the conspiratorial thing to the next level.
Well, I think it's quite interesting that they're always giving like liberals and people on the left shit for playing identity politics, but they do it all the time on the conservative side. Like Trump's campaign was all about the Mexicans invading and keeping out the Muslims. And, you know, I'm not sure what the candidate himself said that much about Jews, but he certainly appealed to anti-Semitic people and a lot of white nationalists. And a lot of it was just, and also kind of like, regressive, like left-wing SJW is kind of like its own form of identity. Like that's a boogeyman. Like we've got to keep those people away from power because they're going to take away something that makes us, you know, the people that we want to be. So we're going to vote for Trump based on being scared of an identity. So that's kind of like identity politics too. So I don't know why the conservatives say that the left are their identity politics people when they're always going on and on about, you know, different races and genders and having a problem with that. So yeah,
I think if you know, on a day like this, what we really are going to probably end up talking about is who's to blame for this. Other than the right wing, obviously, obvious, you know, the diehard, like Trump's base is what basically what I'm referring to.
Fuckheads.
Trump's base obviously is to blame for this, but beyond that, you know, he wouldn't have been able to get in power with just that. So
I think, yeah, besides the broad ignorance and stupidity and anti-reason bent of just America as an amorphous quality, besides blaming that, we've got to find like more specific things to blame.
Yeah, and I will get to that. But we'll get to that, believe me, because
some people are just like, fuck America, fuck Americans. Americans,
yeah, I'm sort of
morons.
there's a big part of me that, like, as a non-American who, as soon as I heard about this, was just wanting to like disengage, you know, with the country.
Yeah. Like there's a certain part of me too that just wants to be like, fuck America.
Yeah,
fuck
yeah.
That entire fuck all of them. But then I'm like, no, that's not really reasonable.
Yeah, I'm not actually saying that, of course, and I'm not going to totally disengage. But what I want to talk about is that impulse. And also like how it sort of reminds me of how I was in my early 20s. But yeah, we'll get
George
past.
Bush, yes. Oh man.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I want to talk about how Obama has made me complacent, but we'll get to that. Anyway, I just wanted to say, so like you were saying, if we're not going to talk about the more nebulous, wider-reaching aspects of like the quote-unquote "who's to blame" thing, in terms of culture, character, and American culture and society and all that. We'll get to that though. If we're not going to talk about that for now, then you're right. We have to talk about something a bit more specific and a bit more targeted. And that is what I've seen a lot of on social media, especially Twitter, over the last, you know, like what's it been, like a little bit more than 12 hours, like 16 hours or something. Yeah. So. Yeah, I've seen a lot of that. People on the left, like blaming which elements of the left or center that are to blame for this, you know? Hey, what have you seen? Because I'd be interested to compare notes. You're more active on Twitter than me. You've got you follow more people and you get into more conversations and stuff. So I'd be interested to hear what you've.
Well, I mean, I already know who I blame. So
I do too, but I blame more than one group. But yeah, I'd be interested to. Yeah, I do want to hear like your thoughts, of course. But I also wanted to know like what you've been seeing on social media.
Oh, I've been heaps of people have been saying, you did this left, you created Trump, and then I think Dave Rubin had a tweet where he was like, "Wow, turns out when you call people racist and sexist, they don't want to support you or something." And of course it all comes back to the evil SJW people who cause everything by calling everyone sexist and racist and stuff. But I think that's silly because there's two main components. One is that Trump himself pandered a lot to kind of white nationalism, white pride, and racism and sexism, and people liked it. A lot of people were like, yeah, I hate the Muslims. I don't like the Mexicans. Like, I'm worried about foreign people coming and fucking over America, and we want to be sovereign, and this is America, and get your hands off my guns and stuff. And that appealed to a lot of people. So there's a certain level of just his straight up appeal to, and also like to men who were like, damn, women overreaching with the, you know, taken issue with the man doing locker room talk. God damn it, whatever. Like, you know, there was, but there were like legitimately for real. There was a bunch of people for whom that was an element. And fuck, what was the second one? I forgot the second one. Oh, the second one is just that Hillary did very little to appeal to create a vision that actually appealed to people. In my opinion, she was just sort of like, yeah, we're going to make healthcare better and we'll have a nice place with the good policies and help the middle class and that kind of thing. But everyone had already heard a much better version of that with Bernie already. So it's not like that people were jazzed about that. Like they were. So basically, Trump's message super appealed to the people that liked it. And Hillary's message was very just milquetoast and kind of like vague. I call it like generic liberalism. It's like, oh, it's sort of a generic left-ish thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas we already saw that Bernie offered a real alternative and like, I want a revolution, I want change. And everyone was like, well, that looks good. And then he went away and everyone was like, what are we left with? Just this kind of like robotic person who just has like vague liberal policies that aren't very exciting. You know? So.
Yeah, that's one thing I'm definitely want to address in this is that people, you know, I don't think many people would argue with, well, actually, no, and I have observed quite a bit on social media people that would argue with this, but I think a lot of people wouldn't argue with the idea that Hillary's a bad candidate. Having said that, though,
I totally agree.
They said the same thing. They said the same thing about Trump, though. He was supposed to be an even worse candidate. So,
right, but the badness of him appeals to a large chunk of people, whereas the badness of Hillary just makes them not excited. Whereas a lot of people celebrated the badness of Trump. They were like, "Yes, this guy's horrible. I love it."
That's what I was going to say. Is that it turns out that to a higher proportion of the American population than not, in terms of who voted. It turns out that Trump's bad things, a lot of them weren't bad things. And that Hillary's bad things were bad things, and actually worse things than a lot of people thought.
If he's like, oh, it's locker room talk, you know, God, they're all liars, or fuck everything, blah blah. Like to a sane or a reasonable individual will be like, that's horrible. But there's a certain chunk of voters who are like, yeah, this guy's strong, he's the man, and they still go and vote. So it's like, say what you want, his message appealed to people. You know, even if we hate his message, if it's like a horrible, sexist, racist, misogynistic pile of garbage, it still appealed to people. So I think the message is you have to actually appeal to voters if you want to win. I
don't necessarily know that his message appealed to people that much. I think it was more about people who didn't want to vote for Hillary.
I disagree. Well, it depends who you're talking about. We're talking about the faithful and the people around the right and people who could be swayed, like kind of independent people.
Well, we need to define our terms, I suppose, in terms of who we're actually talking about. I am talking about the independents.
Right.
I think the independent, because there's this whole thing where, you know, both you were hearing, I heard arguments, both these arguments in the weeks and months, you know, before the election, that there was supposedly these secret Trump voters and these secret Hillary voters, depending on who you asked, right? That the polls were wrong.
The second one was
this also depends when you're taking the poll in terms of what scandal was going on at the time. But yeah,
inconceivable.
They were saying that people were saying that they weren't going to vote for Trump in polls, but then when they get into the booth, they would. And then people said the same exact thing about Hillary, and for totally different reasons.
Why would you say it about Hillary? It would just be fear of Trump, wouldn't it?
Well, no, I don't even think we need to necessarily talk about the reasons, especially not for the secret Hillary voters, considering they don't exist according to the election results.
I'm just saying, if they did exist, their reason, I guess, would be Trump is so bad, and that was one of the main messages of Hillary's campaign as well.
Well, the idea is that
pushing that hard. I'm not Trump. Trump is bad, and apparently that didn't work. So.
No, but and I think what I'm talking about is it depends on what scandal was happening. So if there's a Hillary scandal going on, and the Hillary would dip in the polls, and the theory was that you'd call up and they wouldn't say they were voting for Hillary because of the scandal, and they didn't want to seem like they were tying themselves to such a scandalous individual, I guess, or whatever at the time. And then the same thing with Trump's many scandals, that people would be unwilling to admit in phone polls or whatever that they were going to vote for the guy who said the bad thing.
Sorry.
Well, my point is that the secret Hillary voters, it turns out, don't exist, and the secret Trump voters most certainly do exist, because the polls are wrong.
Well, you know? Like maybe people on the left and the right have different standards when they're voting, and a scandal matters more to people on the left than it does to the right. I don't know, but I actually think it's more that the people who saw the scandals with Trump still liked him, and they still were like, he's still strong, and he stands for something, and you know, he's anti-establishment, even though he's actually not. But whatever. I mean, people are very ignorant about that.
Yeah.
But they thought that he was anti-establishment. They thought he stood for something, so they were like, I can still vote for him despite these scandals, because obviously establishment's just trying to take him down because he's such a threat or something. Whereas when it comes to Hillary, they were like, wow, she's a super insider. She's all Wall Streeted up. She's a corporate robot. I can't really relate to her, and she has all these scandals. Maybe I don't. Maybe I'm not that excited about voting for her. You know.
I mean, we also have to take into account the fact that the low-informed nature of the American voter. I mean, that's true in most representative democracies, but it's especially true.
Oh,
I mean, like, I heard literally
true?
At Trump rallies, I heard people literally complain about the fact that Hillary was born into wealth when Hillary wasn't born into wealth and Trump was.
Right.
So are you? What the fuck? You know?
Well, I think like Trump is gonna. I don't know the exact numbers. Like cut corporate tax from like 37% to 25% or something. And I'm gonna bring this guy up again, but when I was arguing with Itchy Sphinx a while back, and I was like, yeah, but his tax policies are just hideous, whatever. And his response was just like, mud taxes, yeah. And I was like, what do you mean mud taxes? Like, does no one actually care about the economy anymore? Like, apparently, nah, that's not a big deal. Trillions of dollars being given away to corporations, that doesn't matter. What we care about is building the fucking wall. You know, it's just like they don't care about actual policies and how they affect people's lives. Like, I did a video where I ran through all of the policies and came to the conclusion that Trump's policies are a fucking mess that don't work and don't make sense. And I can only come to the conclusion that so many voters don't care about policy. They don't care about, all they care about is the bluster. And like, I watched Trump's winning speech, and it was just the most empty thing I've ever seen. He literally said, we're going to bring great things back to America. We're going to make great things. And I was like, I don't even know what that means. Like, what does it even mean? But a lot of people are like, yes, great things, good.
I think you could make that statement that people don't care that much about policy, especially when compared to other things they could care about when electing people. I think you could make that claim about a lot of these democracies. Where, like, certainly you can make that claim about New Zealand, that policy is not the most important thing. However, that doesn't mean in New Zealand we can elect someone who has very few policies. You know, like, we're not that wouldn't happen here. Well, I'd seriously doubt it could ever happen here. That where we would elect someone who has such a basic and non-existent in many cases policy platform. You know, I think New Zealand voters do care a lot about other things other than policies, but you need to at least have some, and they do care to some extent about it. You know what I mean?
I think identity politics trumps everything, basically.
Yeah,
and the people on the right are in complete denial that they have their own brand of identity politics, and that it's very palpable. Like when he said in his very first speech that, you know, Mexicans are raping people, they're coming over, blah blah. That was just a massive play into identity politics that paid off dividends. Like, it really worked. But then they're like, oh, all the identity politics is on the left with the SJWs and feminists and stuff. But when a guy says, I'm going to ban all the Muslims, they're like, yes. You know, so it's like, it's very hypocritical. And then when you start talking about policy, they're like, nah, my policy, nah. And you're like, that shit actually matters. It affects people's lives. Apparently, the economy, whatever.
The clues in the term politician, you know? Yep. That policy is kind of like a big deal. But anyway.
That's not. Apparently, like, if I say, wow, like all of the projections say that Trump's economic policies are completely broken and it's going to lead to a lot of job loss and decline, and like people won't be able to have as much access to healthcare. People will be more people on the streets. Families will be suffering. A lot of people are going to slip into like sort of the lower class or whatever. They're just like, build a wall. And it's like, okay. and I'm going to stop our Muslims. And it's like, yeah, but what about all the stuff I just said? And they're like, yeah, economy, whatever. Like, literally, these are the conversations I've been having.
Yeah,
it's like identity politics just defeats actual substantial conversations. So.
It's funny you mention healthcare because like, I've been saying this quite a bit over the last 68 hours or however long it's been. That you know, the way it generally seems to work in American politics is if you say a certain thing over and over again when asked about it in debates, town halls, things like that, that becomes like your policy position on it. So, like, you know, for example, Bernie would always say the same, not exactly the same words like a robot, but, you know, the same basic talking points that became like known as his policies. Well, that's more just vague rhetoric. I mean, like, like in a town hall, someone stands up and says, "What's your take on X?" And then he says, "My take is Y." You know, and that he would always say basically that to that kind of question. Well, when Trump was asked about healthcare, this is literally, he said this exact phrase more than once. So this became, as absurd as this is to say, this became his policy platform on healthcare, which is replace Obamacare with something fantastic.
Sounds good. It sounds very similar to what he said in his victory speech, which was, "We're going to have such great things." And that's literally it. It's just like, okay,
it's just
great thing
there.
I know, but like, I think he's the shit-talking candidate, and it shows you that in America, so long as you're willing to talk a whole bunch of shit, you can win. Just bluster and talk shit, and people will vote you in because they're fucking stupid, to be honest.
That's certainly how it worked with Reagan. He does remind me of Reagan in some ways, and very much not in other ways, of course, but in some ways.
I don't think Reagan was as good at smack talking as Trump.
Well, I mean, that's what I was going to... Yeah, he doesn't... Reagan was different in character in a lot of different ways from Trump, but in certain ways, they are similar.
Like, he seems like a nicer person.
If we are going to start talking smack about elements of the left or center or American society or whatever, in terms of who's to blame for this other than than Trump's base, so we might as well get into that.
Yeah, that's
well. You said you know who you blame, so you go first.
Hillary fucking Clinton. That's who I blame. Because I know a lot of people want to blame the voters, or they want to blame the supporters, or they want to say, if Bernie people had just gotten in line, or if you just bowed your head and done this or done that, or oh, you didn't fight Trump hard enough, or you whatever. All of that is just covering up the fact that, as I said before, Hillary did not have much of an appeal to people, and that's her fault and her campaign's fault. Because they, in my opinion, just simply didn't have enough things they could say, these are the exciting policies and vision that we're offering for America. Like, I don't even know what her vision for America would be. You know, Trump's vision was, we're going to close up our borders and shit, and we're going to just become like one America, white power, whatever. And a bunch of people loved it. And then Hillary's message is just, we're going to do vague liberal things. And I just think there was nothing exciting there.
On some level, Hillary's position was more Obama. Was just, you know, I'm going to be kind of like Obama, basically. But, you know,
it doesn't jazz people up at all. They're not excited about it. So.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, it would have worked out a lot better than a Trump administration. The Trump administration's going to, but you know, probably. But
we're talking politics here. We're not talking like rationality and reason.
Yeah, but that's the thing, is that people want. This has been a change year. People have wanted change. That's been very obvious from the very get-go. You know, Bernie Sanders would not have broken records in grassroots support if it hadn't been. You know,
right.
I've seen people on social media complaining that he ran as a Democrat at all because he wasn't a Democrat. It's like, dude, it's a democracy. You have to pay attention to what the people want, and the people wanted change. So how are you going to get that from someone who's been a Democrat for the last 40 years? No, you get that by someone who hasn't been. That's that's why Trump won. So no, don't give me that bullshit about he should have not run as a Democrat. That's bullshit.
I also do think, and I mean, like, it would be great to have a female president, but I feel like she did overplay that that piece of identity politics. Instead of like putting in there some kind of vision that people could have, instead she just kept saying, "I'll be the first woman president." And I just thought, like, when did Obama didn't play up the fact that he was black? And I can't remember Bernie being like, "I will be the greatest Jewish president" and stuff. I feel like that's the kind of thing that you should talk about after you've won, But I think
I do agree Hillary made a
Yeah.
mistake there, but what I would say is that it's absolutely fine for Hillary's supporters, people who her allies and political allies, and also just her surrogates and stuff. It's fine for them to say it.
I don't agree,
But it
because
does
I think
get a little it gets a little strange when she personally herself is saying it as much as she said it. Like I think that's more something that the people around her should be saying a lot. You know what I mean?
I don't agree, because that's where Bernie Bros came from, was this idea that, I mean, there was a bunch of people who supported Bernie who were misogynist whatevers. But then Bernie Bros itself, I think, became like a divisive, like, you don't support her because she's a woman. And I was subjected to that a little bit. And I was like, no, I just don't like her policies. I think she's too corporate. I think she's beholden to Wall Street. I think she's not going to change the system. It's absolutely nothing to do with her being a woman. And then they start playing this fucking identity politics. And I think that put off like just massive swaths of Bernie supporters. Were like, fuck her whole campaign, you know, because they were like, no, we want Hillary to change to be more progressive. That's what they were after, you know. But they were like, oh, you just don't like women and shit, and then that turned into like an identity politics thing. In fact, maybe those Bernie supporters are entitled, and they are like, I want everything to go my way. But the fact is, here we are today with Hillary not getting the support she needed, and she lost. So I think part of that was a bad strategy, to be honest. So
yeah, I think I wanted to talk a lot about the whole Bernie Bros thing, and there's another the Bernie or bust thing as well. I want to bring up both of those particularly those as labels. I'd like to talk about them because to me they're just sort of similar to SJW, regressive leftist, cuck, or that they're just basically that, but you know, directed at a different group, and they're not in the regard that they're totally counterproductive to, you know, actually having a constructive conversation. If you want to get people on board, you don't start calling them pejorative labels, you know, and that's what Bernie Bro is.
Not if it's your campaign that you're trying to build a movement out of, because we could agree that like, oh yeah, heaps of the Bernie people were misogynist scumbags or whatever. But when it just comes down to basic politics, it's not going to get people out supporting you. They're not going to be canvassing for you. They're not going to be saying like, "Hey, let's vote Hillary."
Yeah,
and that saying, "Fuck Hillary."
And that term Bernie Bro, wasn't it coined by that guy who runs one of Hillary's super PACs? So it didn't come out of grassroots, as far as I know.
Oh yeah, I mean the DNC was in full war mode against Bernie supporters around the time of the convention, doing everything they possibly could to marginalize them, and then they turn around and they're like, hey, we want your support now. It's just like human minds don't work that way. They're not like, oh, this is the person that treated me like total shit. I'm going to put aside my malice for the sake of the country so Trump doesn't win. It would be ideal if people thought that. That's why I said, like, people should vote Hillary and just support Hillary and do your best to try to get her to win. But then I think Cenk Uygur from Young Turks said it too. Like, the moment she wins, you know, fight her as much as you can to make her go more left. We just got to avoid Trump. But a lot of people don't share my point of view. They were just like, fuck Hillary and her campaign. Those people who treated me like shit, I'm not supporting them. You know?
Yeah, there's an argument I heard that there's just the amount of people who just wanted to throw a spanner into the works. Any spanner. Doesn't matter what kind of change it is. Just any kind of change. Which is irrational. That's an irrational position to take. Because you know, it's madness. But there were people, I think there were quite a lot of people like that. I think that argument is valid to at least to some amount of Americans. That did seem to be a thing. People just wanted change.
I think the problem is with politics, people assume out of hand that other people have the same point of view that they have. So like if a Hillary supporter back in the day or whatever said to me, you just hate Hillary because you don't like women and you need to support her and stuff, that just sounds like somebody trying to shame you into doing something. And there's this natural like human resistance, like, no, fuck you. I'm not supporting Hillary, you know? Whereas I put that aside and I said people should vote for Hillary because we don't want Trump to win. At the same time, I understand other people don't feel that way.
I would have advocated voting for Hillary above almost pretty much, well, yeah, actually take out the almost, any Republican candidate. Just because, of course. Yeah, you know? Like, why wouldn't I? Of course I would. I mean...
It's rational.
Yeah. I mean, there are some parts of the, you know, there are some elements that won't change between a Democrat and a Republican. Like, you know, like I said on Twitter last night, that innocent Muslims are still going to get bombed and the innocent Middle Easterners are still going to get bombed regardless of who wins. So from, you know, in terms of, there are like ways in which it doesn't really matter, but there are definitely ways in which it does matter. So yeah, of course I'd advocate Hillary over any Republican candidate. But
also, a lot of people said that Bernie was like a sellout for supporting Hillary, and I didn't agree. I thought he was just being practical. It's what he needed to do. It was the right thing to do. It was just like, look, I can put this aside because I don't want Trump to win, and I think that was the right thing to do. He wasn't a sellout at all. That was just a practical move that makes sense. But a lot of people,
be a good leader. That's from what that was what I got. There, it was showed him to be level-headed and intelligent and pragmatic. A good leader. Yeah.
And people can't get their head around this. That still doesn't make Hillary a good candidate. You know?
No.
She still sucks. It's just Bernie was like, he was the bigger man. He could see the wider picture. He's like, I pretty much just have to support her. So
I don't place the blame on Hillary at all as a person, as an individual. I agree she's a bad candidate and it would have been better to have a better candidate. But
I so disagree.
Looking at it from her point of view, she just wanted to be president and she was well suited. Like she had experience. And, you know, from the point of view of like a conventional presidential candidate, I can totally get what she was going for. But it wasn't a conventional year, so she got that wrong. But, you know, she just wanted to be president. And, you know, that's the same of any presidential candidate. However,
I totally blame her for like, I just want to be president. That's not fucking good enough. You need a vision. You need a reason. You can't just want to be president. Like,
well, I didn't say that was all there was to it, but it was, you know, most of it, maybe. It did seem that way.
Entitled to the presidency, and I think that is.
Well, I wouldn't take it that far.
Point of view. Well, I think I'm harsher on Hillary than you might be sometimes. I think. I don't know. If
she'd just been first lady or something and hadn't worked in the Senate or as Secretary of State, then maybe. But no, I think she. You can't. I don't think she was acted entitled to the presidency. I think, like it was like, although you know it was kind of Nixon-esque in the whole running again thing. You know, Nixon ran for
Hillary 2020. Yay!
Yeah, at this point, she seriously has to stop running. Yeah.
Imagine that's incredible. Like, look at this. Like, Elizabeth Warren is going to run, and it's going to really excite the progressive base. And wait a minute, here comes Hillary again. Like, no! What are you doing? Get her out of there.
Here's how I look at it in terms of who's to blame other than Trump's base. I look at it in two ways. One, the establishment media. Absolutely never even considered for 1 second Bernie as a serious candidate, ever. Even despite the fact that it's supposed to be a fucking democracy, and he was breaking records for grassroots support.
Yep.
How many times did he break that record for individual contributions? I remember him breaking his own record in the primaries several times. That's that. You know, and they just, how can you not give someone that would never happen in a functioning actual democracy, that you would just have this candidate who had a massive amount of a groundswell of grassroots support and just never even consider them seriously at all. It's insane.
I remember they had a town hall with like Anderson Cooper, and his questions for Hillary were a lot more mild and less judgmental than the ones he had for Bernie. Yeah, softballs. The ones he had for Bernie were like, blah blah magazine says that you're a socialist and that socialism has always failed throughout history and led to, I can't remember the exact questions, led to the genocide of the native people of Guatemala, and that if you're in power, we could be seeing record levels of poverty and misery and pain and death. How do you respond to that? And why has socialism such a failure? Like, oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah. I think those people, all of those, him included, everyone who took part in doing that stuff, and there was a lot of them in the media, they all need to be held accountable because they helped Trump win, without a doubt.
Fucking Cooper. God damn.
Yeah.
That guy.
Billions of dollars of free publicity for Trump, which he wouldn't have been able to pay for because the guy actually isn't as rich as he claims. We all know that. And he, you know, and he didn't have the what do you call it? The support from the bundlers and the funders and all that. He didn't have them. He only had that one dude, the guy who funds Breitbart, and you know, that was his Robert Mercer. That was, he only had one of the billionaires, and he still won, you know?
Yeah. Can you remember CNN had a town hall with the Republican candidates, and it was just like a love fest. It was like pretty much just, you know, CNN
the one where
jerking off all the Republicans for...
They were talking about like Ted Cruz being romantic with his wife, and like talking about Ben Carson's, well, they were like going on about his honeymoon or some shit. Oh, it was
Marco
fucking
Rubio listens to like dance.
Oh, Rubio listening to EDM. Yeah. Fucking hell, man. Yeah, this election has been a fucking joke, you know.
But like they had all of those inane softballs for all the Republicans and for Hillary, and then the moment you get to Bernie, he's just being pummeled with these like extremely harsh questions, you know.
Yeah, God. I mean, there is no more evidence necessary that the United States democratic system is just broken, and that the media is a massive part in why it's broken. They're supposed to be doing the opposite of what they're literally the opposite. Their job, you know, the media, the only people listed in the Constitution, the only job title other than like, I guess politician or whatever mentioned directly in the Constitution is the media. Yeah, and that's for fucking good reason, because they have a function in society to be the stalwart against the powers, you know, to question.
Ideally they wouldn't ask those like ridiculous gotcha smearing questions, which is just like a gimmick, and they wouldn't ask the like total softball bullshit. It would be somewhere in the middle where they're actually trying to probe and like find out, challenge them and find out how their ideas work, you know. But that's not what we get.
I don't object to the idea of a gotcha question, but the ones they do are bullshit, you know. That they don't actually
gotcha question.
Well, yeah, like I mean, like what I mean is I don't object to them like pulling a question out of nowhere that takes the politician off guard and is a really good point and really makes them look terrible. I don't object to that at all. But the ones they use are all wrong. You know,
like it has to be, there has to be an opportunity for the candidate to actually have an answer. Otherwise, it's just the news person making a statement and saying, "Don't you feel bad about how stupid you are because you said this or something?" You're like, there are a few moments like that where I'm like, okay, like I might not like this candidate, but it seems like you're just ambushing them. I would prefer if they ask questions that really get to the heart of what that person thinks and believes. But I also do like it when a politician won't answer the question and they keep pushing them because they should.
Regardless of how we feel about all that, we can definitely agree that they need to fuck off with the softball bullshit. Totally. That just has no place. And like, why would they even do it? Why do they even do it? You know, what's the point?
But it was fair across the board. It needs to be fair. It needs to be like.
It needs to be. No, I don't necessarily agree with that. It needs to be objective. That's the only thing I'd say about the media. They need to be objective. Fair, I don't know if I'd agree with that, because politicians aren't fair themselves a lot of the time. So if the ones that aren't fair, fuck them, you know. But you know, so I don't know if I'd necessarily.
It depends how you define fair. So.
Well, that's very true. I just mean that if we are going to talk, you know, bring up specific terms, that's the one I would focus on rather than fair, is objectivity, because that's the thing that
I just meant fair in that it's proportional to each candidate. So if you've got a candidate who's way worse, like Trump, than the other ones, I think it's okay to ask them like questions about all the fucked up shit that's been going on in their campaign.
But that's exactly what I'm saying with objective, though. That's literally exactly what I'm saying.
That's why, like, CNN did have some funny headlines. Like one of them was, like, Trump says he didn't say stuff he said.
Yeah,
like, that is literally just objective. He objectively said things, and then he said he didn't say them, and then that's the headline. Trump said he didn't say things he said. I was like, all right, CNN is like, to me that's fair. That's objective. It's like, you know, but if they want to be nice, they'll be like, Trump denies saying things, and they wouldn't point out that he did say. They just say that he denies saying things, and then like the viewer makes up their own mind. Like, did he or didn't he say them? I don't know. Yeah. CNN won't tell me.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly.
So they had a few good headlines like that, but it's not consistent.
What's your opinion of the Hillary campaign around her? Not talking about Hillary herself, but what do you think of how her campaign did with what they had?
Well, I mean, there was the whole fucking WikiLeaks thing. That's a whole nother just clusterfuck of pain and death. But
yeah, so like, how do you think they reacted and responded to all of that stuff as it was happening, and how do you think they did with the conventional things that political campaigns have to do and all that. Because I actually think the Hillary campaign was pretty smart. They just didn't really have a shot, it turns out, you know.
But that's why I think that the main problem again was the policies and the candidate and the message, because they had a good ground game and they had a good organization and the good social media stuff. But like, you can have an incredible social media like machinery and then have nothing to put out on it except just a whole bunch of platitudes and stuff that doesn't really excite people, but at least it's sort of getting to them. So
yeah, and that's kind of why
Hillary is kind of for keeping Obamacare going. Whoop-de-doo. Like, you know.
Yeah, that's kind of why I asked, because it seems to me that the machinery was there to put out a really good campaign for someone who had a real message for change. You know what I mean? Like if Bernie had been the candidate, there was a really sophisticated campaign around Hillary in a lot of ways. Like, yeah, their social media presence was good. They just didn't have a message, you know. They had the people there, the organization to do it, but they didn't really, they weren't really working with much. And like, you know, so I think that, and there were things like the way Hillary got Trump to say he didn't, well, she got him to say certain things that they were predicting he would say in the debates. And then like within hours of the end of the debate, they would put out these attack ads on Trump with clips from the debate. So obviously they'd edited most of the ad together before the debate and then just slotted these clips from the debate in to their ad. So they knew what they were going to do. And there's great examples of that from them, all of the debates, but in particular that that Pence one, the vice president one, where, you know, Pence was all like, we didn't say that. There's all these clips. They had already gotten all the clips of Trump saying the things that they accused Trump of saying. Yeah. They must have predicted that he was going to deny saying at least some of them. And so they just put this ad out like the next morning of him denying, you know, first, we didn't say that, then followed by clip of Trump saying that. Or even Pence saying that in some cases. Like the whole Putin. Yeah, Putin.
Yeah.
So go. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, but as you say, that points to the machinery being good. It doesn't point to the actual campaign being good.
Well, I mean, it depends how you define campaign, but it didn't, in terms of the people being good at their jobs, I think that part was solid.
Oh, in terms of
the jobs being done well, that's a different question.
I mean, like the message, because they, from an early stage, part of their strategy was just tear into Trump as much as possible. And all of the Republicans already tried that a lot, and it failed for all of them. So that's only half of the message. Half of the message is, look at this fucking Trump guy. The other half of the message has to be some kind of uplifting, triumphant fucking, you know, vision of like, yeah, Hillary's gonna do this. It's good. Yes. Yeah, and it was just completely missing. There wasn't some aspirational thing. It was just like, finally, there'll be a woman president who continues Obama's policies. Yeah.
That's, I guess, part of why they went with the first female president thing so much, is because that's factually true. You can't deny that. It's definitely that's the case, you know.
Wasn't enough,
if they run this really aspirational change campaign, nobody would have bought it. You know, they would have been like, Hillary.
I think it would have helped better. I think that she should have done everything she could to like pander to Bernie people, and she didn't even try. Really?
Yeah, there were things that, like how she appointed Debbie Wasserman Schultz to that honorary position in the DNC immediately after she resigned. That was just like, oh, fuck you. Fuck you. You know? That was fucking tone deaf. Yeah, there was a lot of things around the time of the DNC that were fucking tone deaf.
Also, after all of that well poisoning, how is she supposed to appeal to like left-wingers who want a political revolution? Because they wouldn't fucking believe her, would they? So she was in a tough spot. But apparently she did way worse with like even Latinos than people thought she was going to do.
Right.
I saw some figures on that. Trump actually got a very surprising amount of the Latino vote.
You know, they don't know that, right? Because it's secret ballot. They don't know who. Well, that's just polls. Wherever you read, they don't know.
Polls,
like
they've done well for us, haven't they?
Well, exactly. That's why I brought it up, because they don't know like what way Latinos voted. To my knowledge, I'm pretty sure that secret ballot prevents that. But they do. That's usually they use the last minute polls for that. The last poll.
This is a question I have because I don't currently know the answer. But was the polling wrong in a historic manner? Because if it was, I feel more justified in the video I made looking at polls. And if it wasn't, then I guess I was just wrong anyways. So, yeah.
I'm no expert on this, but my understanding is that in the last weeks before the election, the national polls are generally considered unreliable, and they go for the swing state polls, and those are seen as reliable. And in the 2012 election, 538 used those swing state polls to accurately predict the entire election.
Right.
So yeah, I think it definitely seems to have been historic in terms of the polls, the swing state polls not being accurate.
And there was, as you said before, a whole bunch of quote unquote secret Trump voters.
Yeah, it turns out that there was people who weren't comfortable saying out loud, even to one person on a phone call, they were going to vote Trump. But when they got in the booth, that's the box they ticked.
And I do also think that combined with the lack of excitement on the Hillary side is kind of that was the death knell, really.
It just, yeah, I really, the central message that I want to make here is I really think Bernie would have been a better candidate against Trump. And
right.
We can get into why I think that, as soon as you say that, people will say, but he lost with the primaries, so that doesn't even matter because he wouldn't have won because he lost. Well, yeah, but then a few things. One, like I said, the establishment media fucking witch hunted that guy and shilled for the other side, shilled for a particular candidate in a primary, which is not okay.
Bernie would have been an actual challenge to the establishment, so
which is what Trump was, which means the decision, because the decision came.
But he's not a challenge to the establishment at all. That's all just a fucking image. He's got Wall Street bankers up the wazoo and Newt Gingrich and fucking Mike Pence at his side. He's just not.
Well, yeah, exactly. But that's the thing, is that in optics, what the election came down to was establishment versus outsider. Even though that's not actually true in the ground, that was the optics, right?
It's so inaccurate. Trump is not an anti-establishment. He's not an outsider. He's going to deregulate and cut fucking taxes.
He's an establishment Republican, totally.
It's amazing how bamboozled people are just by tough words. We're going to have great things. Everyone's like, great.
Yeah, how much people care about optics and stuff. Yeah.
I know. He's not no, it's going to be I think his administration is going to be a bit like Bush 2.0. But foreign policy is just going to be
first half of Bush or second half, because that was very different administration.
Without 9/11. Well, maybe. Oh God.
Well, Bush's first term was basically controlled by the neocons, and then in the second term he replaced a lot of them.
A key difference between Bush and Trump is that, in my personal opinion, Trump's foreign policy is just random.
I don't think Trump's as likely to launch wars as neocons.
Mate, but how do you know that? It's just he has no clear vision except I love the military and I love Israel and Putin's cool. And that's about it. I don't know.
You have to have a global agenda, a global ideology, view, plan. If you're going to launch wars, wars have end goals, and he doesn't have that. So I don't know why he would launch it. There would be no reason. But as we saw
under Bush, sometimes the president is tested by something that happens, and how is he going to react? No one actually knows. If 9/11 happened, or another 9/11 style event happened under Trump, what's going to happen? No one knows.
I don't know. I think all that stuff with the Bush administration is all a bit of a false narrative. I think they definitely would have tried to go into Iraq regardless of 9/11 happening.
Oh yeah,
they were talking about it before 9/11 even happened.
A lot of those guys had a personal hate boner against Saddam. So
exactly, yeah, and geostrategic reasons for wanting to go into Iraq. They definitely hated Saddam, but they also had a plan. And Trump just doesn't seem like a plan guy,
But that somewhat backs up what I'm saying, though, which is that with those guys, it was it was horrible and terrible, but it was also somewhat seeable. You could kind of predict it. But with Trump, I think you don't know who he's going to lash at.
That's why the donors didn't want to give to him, because he was unpredictable, and you don't know what the fuck he was going to. He wasn't a guy who was going to just toe the line.
Right.
And that was obviously seen as a good thing.
Only in foreign policy. We know what he's going to do domestically, except the wall, I think, will fall apart and everyone will be disappointed by
He's not going to build the wall.
That's not going to work.
Have you seen how much money that would cost?
Yeah, that's just another bamboozle. That's just a total talking point. But we do know
Yes.
he's going to cut regulations, cut taxes, fuck up healthcare, shaft heaps of poor people. We do know he's going to do those things, and he's going to, and the religious right is going to have a direct beeline into like the Supreme Court and basically controlling women's bodies, and it's getting religion in schools and shit. It's just going to be sad.
Yep, and control of Congress, Senate, and the House. Yeah.
So that's all predictable, but in foreign policy, to be honest, I think it's just a big question mark. But that's my feeling about it. But maybe you don't feel the same. I don't know.
Yeah, I do feel like it's a question mark. Absolutely. I mean, it just is factually a question mark. That's it seems. I mean, going by what he says publicly, anyway, which is all we've got. Apart from
everyone's always like, "But Hillary was going to start World War III."
Yeah, no,
which was silly as well.
Hillary Clinton was also not going to start major wars in the Middle East.
They were like, no-fly zone, shoot down a plane, launch a nuke. Simple.
She would have ramped up the drone campaigns and stuff, I reckon, because she's more hawkish than Obama. But I don't think she would have started wars. Even if she wanted to, because the Bush administration made that so unpopular.
Right. Well, there's no direct line between a no-fly zone shooting down a plane and World War III.
Fuck no.
But that is dangerous, and there is a lot of tension, and it's a valid concern. And it's also navel gazing because she's lost, so whatever.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, so okay. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was the way that the primaries run in the US, and my issues with that. And I don't even know how. I think the way we elect our political party leaders in this country is probably even worse from what I've heard about it. But yeah, I don't. Yeah, the way that it works in America, it seems very flawed because there's a lot of states in which independents aren't allowed to vote in the primaries. You have to be like a registered member of the party. And I can see the logic behind that, obviously. But in this particular election, that turned out to be a disaster because in those polls, and I know, we shouldn't trust polls, but this was a long time before the whole secret Trump or secret Hillary or whatever thing was a factor, really. This is, back in the primaries. When they were doing that, because everything was more, I guess like far off, and you could sort of detach yourself from it. But anyway, back then, they did a whole ton of those polls, putting up Hillary and Bernie against Trump and Cruz. You remember that?
Yeah, like running models or simulations or something.
Basically, yeah, the political science version of those. Yeah. And that Bernie did better against both of them than Hillary did in most of those polls.
Yeah,
and specifically with independents, but then the independents weren't allowed to vote in a lot of the primaries, and I think that's a problem because it meant that that Bernie had less chance of getting in, and he was a better candidate against Trump. So,
right. Well, I did see, because I looked at the chat briefly. One person did say like, "Oh, get over it," like he lost, like Bernie or whatever, and I think. Like, yeah, we should get over it. He did lose. I know. I've been aware of that for a long time. But I also think, like, I don't know. Do people want the left to keep going or just give up and let the right take everything or what? Or should we try to be more progressive and fight for the things that we believe in? Or should we just be like, Bernie lost, we're done, just establishment wins? And I don't really feel like in that mood. I feel like I want to, just for my own small part as a foreigner who's it's not my goddamn business to just like criticize the establishment for being fucking pathetic failures.
Here's what I have to say to the whole stop talking about it, he lost thing. That's a fallacy. That's totally illogical to say that. First of all, because A, it's a straw man. Nobody's actually contesting the fucking primary. We know he lost. We're not saying he didn't lose.
We're not
saying it's a fucking we're not contesting it. What we're saying is we're critiquing parts of the things that happened during the primaries. Are we not allowed to do that because he lost? Like, do you know how people who say that? Do they know how history works? Like, because what? Okay, so the Germans these days are not allowed to examine World War II because they lost. Like, what the fuck? That makes no sense. Anyway, so okay.
All I know is there's going to be another election coming, and
we're analyzing recent history, talking about it, and critiquing some things that happened from our views. There's no fucking stop talking about it. He lost. That's basically a non sequitur, and it's certainly a fallacious bullshit argument.
And it's not fucking over until we're all dead.
Yeah,
Just
so
hopefully
I'm
not soon.
totally
Like
allowed
moving.
to go back and look at what happened and talk about it, and it's
Yep.
very much what I'm going to do. So yeah,
Me
so
too.
yeah, like I said, the media played a role, and we haven't talked that much about the DNC's role, because they certainly played a
Is it
role.
even,
There was some fucking dodgy shit went on in Nevada and a few other states, Ohio, Iowa rather. Yeah, there was definitely. I mean, it wasn't like some Bernie voters were saying it was rigged by the DNC. It wasn't rigged by the DNC,
Right,
but they
I
did
agree.
some dirty, they did some underhanded shit they
Well,
shouldn't have done, and were clearly supporting one candidate.
It depends what you mean by rigged. If you mean rigged as in, like, I don't know what happened with the coin toss stuff, but it's a little bit conspiracy theory for me. But
6 coin tosses wins in a row is possible, of course, but it does seem dodgy.
It seems dodgy. So it's possible it was rigged, but we don't know that, and I don't like just saying that something I don't know is true, because I'm not really into conspiracy theories, and I don't mean conspiracy theories in a negative way. I mean, like, because sometimes a conspiracy theory is true. There are valid conspiracy theories. So potentially it's a true conspiracy theory, but I don't know, so I'm not willing to say that it was rigged. But I do know that the entire Democratic establishment worked against Bernie and basically undermined him as much as they possibly could. And if you want to say that means it was rigged, I guess you could, but it's just sort of arguing what rigged means, you know? Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I mean, to a degree, you need to like use words in an accurate way. So if it wasn't to the degree that it was rigged, you probably shouldn't call it that.
Right.
Like rigged to me, it reminds me of the sequence, the episode of Battlestar Galactica where they actually rigged that election while they were going for the military.
Actually, properly, fully rigged.
Yeah, they like intercept the fucking guys walking with the containers with the votes and fucking hijack them and then fuck with them in a room. You know, that's rigging an election. But,
or unless they had like,
so
you know, on what is it, The Dark Knight Returns or whatever the fuck it is, the second Batman movie,
The Dark Knight.
The Dark Knight, when he's got that coin that's got the same thing on both sides.
Well, yeah.
I make my own luck. Hillary wins.
Yeah.
Hillary wins.
Somebody should make a gif of that. That would be amazing.
Yeah. Hillary makes her own luck.
Hillary on both sides of the coin. And like have the guy being like an Iowan.
That was months ago. We've missed opportunity.
Is that what you call? Is that the what's that word? The word to demonym? Is that the demonym for Iowans? I don't know. I think it makes sense, but anyway, it doesn't matter.
Nerdy there.
So yeah, I think the process of excluding independents from the primaries was a contributor to Bernie not winning.
We all agree that DNC fucked over Bernie. We just don't necessarily agree with kind of one-to-one, like Alex Jonesy kind of like haha smoky room thing. But that's still possible too. So
I mean that whole people in a dark room thing. I mean, it's just a very simplistic and reductive view of the world.
It's a very good lighting. It could be a very lovely room.
I mean, it could be that it was a
Catered.
lot more people involved in a lot looser sense, you know. But that's more realistic. But you know, I think that whole people in a dark room doing secret handshakes and all that shit, it's just a stupid person's way of viewing the reality. It's like the 9/11 truth thing. It's like, yeah, America did cause 9/11 because they fucking rounded up all the fucking hardcore Islamist fighters in the world and put them together in one country. It was a fucking stupid idea. And then gave them a bunch of bombs and weapons.
The secret handshake idea. Like, okay, we've done all the evil planning. Secret handshake time. Like, do we really need to do the handshake? Like, yes.
You know what I mean, right? Though that yes, if you view it in a very nuanced and complex and sophisticated way, the Americans did play a major role in causing 9/11. But they didn't fucking fly the planes into the building. That's a stupid person's way of thinking the same thing.
Yeah, and
you know what I mean?
not the same. It's not the same as they deserved it. Why would?
Of course not.
Why would
Yeah.
a whole bunch of random people working in the Twin Towers deserve to get blown up?
Yeah, and that's like the American policies of the American government in the 80s and 90s played a big role in causing it. But that's not the fault of the New York citizens, you know, working in the Twin Towers building. So yeah, I'm not saying the Americans brought it on themselves or anything like that.
Some people do see it differently. They're like, oh, those people were part of the establishment and the machine and the whatever. I think that's fucking stupid because they were just people with families and fucking parents and children, and
That's
now
the sort of thing a total hardcore ideologue would say. Yeah, sort of person who has a very warped view of the world and no compassion.
well, that might be that's the actual real regressive, when someone is so far left that them and the Islamists are like, yeah, they deserved 9/11.
Well, yeah, and you hear a lot of that stuff on the alt left. You know, people saying stupid crap like
alt left. Oh Jesus!
There is an alt left that just, and you know, they've got a whole massive presence on the web. All that fucking anti-vax bullshit and stuff.
I reckon we should just nuke the internet.
Start again.
We've had enough. You didn't use it properly. You've abused this thing. We're taking the internet away from you, humanity.
As someone interested in the social sciences, I totally have the opposite view. I think the internet's been a fascinating revelation into certain things about modern Western human characteristics. You know, the way that in our society, not human because that makes it seem biological and immutable, but sociologically, I mean, it's been a really interesting revelation in a lot of ways. And you have to have the data in order to interpret it and look at it and use it. So I'm totally glad that the internet's shining the light on all this.
Incredible pros and incredible cons. Like the pros are that like people can share a lot more knowledge, you know, contact each other, you know, communicate, and there's so much more information and transparency and freedom. And then the cons are it allows the absolute fucking dregs of society from all over the world to get together and just to be a bunch of horrible, evil cunts. So
yeah, I get, but what I'm saying is that that's not just a con; it's also a pro, because it tells you how many of these people there are and how organized they are and all that. When they group themselves together in a public forum on the internet, people who aren't part of the group can still see that. So
but it allows them to. But I think like partly, a part of that has contributed to Trump winning because.
Yes, true. I mean, I didn't say there wasn't a con. I said it's not just a con.
Oh, not just a con. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, like you can, for example, the whole America's post-racial. That argument is blown away by the internet. You cannot make that argument anymore with what we know because of the internet.
Yeah.
You know, like the amount of like Stormfront and all that shit. You can go there and say, look at this shit. Look how much of it there is. Look, there's hundreds of these sites. You know, and look at all these YouTube channels and look at all these Twitter feeds and stuff. You can say that. And so from the point of view of an academic pointing out the realities of certain things about society, it's a blessing.
Well, but, I think in the main, when you weigh up the pros and the cons, you've got
the cons win. Yeah.
You've got the transparency and the freedom, and then you've got all the disgusting hate. I think on balance, you should nuke the fucking internet. And just destroy it. We're done.
I definitely would have disagreed with that yesterday.
I'm half joking. Don't worry.
Oh yeah, that's what I mean. I would have outright never even entertained that thought. But now today I'm like, yeah, this part of me wants to fucking nuke the internet.
Oh god, this is gonna be so taken out of context and. Oh, just a joke card. Huh, you were clearly serious, authoritarian.
Yeah. What I mean is, though, that like one of the first things I was thinking last night is that the me of before this was a naive me.
Well, I also think
this time yesterday was an innocent Dan.
People have off-the-cuff reactions, so they're kind of like, fuck America, fuck all white people, you racist, misogynist, fucking backwards scum, die, or whatever. And I don't have such a sudden, harsh reaction. I just think like, yeah, this is just part of a wider thing that's been happening. But it seems like a lot of people just flip the fuck out. I didn't really, but I was obviously quite disappointed. But I wasn't screaming from the rooftops because like all of the like misogyny and racism or whatever, I mean, it's been evident to me for all of the months preceding this. So it's not that big a surprise, to be perfectly honest. It sucks. Yeah. So
and then, one element of this is like from the point of view of like the gender culture war thing, it really gives me some evidence. You know, it's like, is this really just not a big deal? That's an online thing. Really?
It's so selfish.
The fucking White House is a fucking groping piece of shit.
You're like, at least I've got my data.
Yeah,
It's I got my data. I'm happy.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying there's an element of that. Yeah, like, yeah. I mean, it's hard to over the next 4 years or whatever. It's well, maybe he's going to be impeached, hopefully. But if he's not, and he only serves 1 term, as another hope, I guess. I'm maybe naively.
My feeling was people were fucking shit yesterday, and they're still fucking shit. So what a surprise!
Yes, but that's there's more to it than that, because you were not. It's not like you weren't surprised by this result. Everybody was.
Well, I'm not. I don't actually know if I was that surprised, to be honest.
I thought Hillary was going to win.
I did, like, because I did have a follow-up video where I was talking about how she's going to win, and I boasted a few times to people that she was going to win, like, she's going to win, fuck you, whatever. And somebody quoted back to me talking to Naked Ape, and me saying, like, I hope you don't cry too much when Trump loses. Although, in my just a joke defense, I was trolling Naked Ape for quite a while because it was just fun. But
he's a very trollable dude. Yeah,
I know. I was just trying to, like, kind of quote unquote trigger him a little bit. But I did think Hillary was going to win. But I have thought for a long time that she's a very weak candidate, and I did kind of think for a while this could go the other way.
What it came down to, in my opinion, is that we knew that it was a change year, and that Hillary was representing the establishment position in a change year, which is a totally bad position to be in, a dangerous and terrible position to be in for a political candidate. But I think everyone just assumed that Trump was such a worse candidate that didn't even matter. That because his unfavorables were worse than Hillary's, and he kept saying horrible things, that this guy was just, that was going to be the important thing, and that wasn't the important thing. The change year thing was the important thing.
People give Hillary shit about the basket of deplorables. Oh, Jesus, look at that. But I think she was fucking right. There's a massive basket of deplorables, and they voted
she was
for Trump.
Factually correct, but that doesn't mean she should have said it.
I know. It was bad optics, and it looked bad and didn't help her. But she was right, and they voted for Trump.
She actually was a conservative estimate. It's more than half.
She needed a basket of Clintonians that just wasn't around to, like, support her. So
she said it was 50-50, right? That the deplorables are about 50%, and that the reasonable people, Trump supporters, were the other 50%. Well, I saw multiple people do some basic math on a bunch of polls and work out that it was actually more like 60%. You know those polls that we're talking about?
Don't know.
There were those polls that asked Trump supporters whether they agreed or disagreed with a bunch of, like, racist and sexist shit. And so they worked out, like, how racist and bigoted Trump supporters are. And the numbers, it came back more like, it was more like 60% were deplorable. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it's a basket of deplorables, and they have defeated me. So, oops.
Yeah.
Like, yes, they are, and they won. So
should we get into our whole the whole thing we were alluding to before, which is our view, a wider view of the American populace, and our how this has given us pause as foreigners to reassess how we view that?
First, quickly, I'm just gonna say I'm planning on making a video where I revisit my views on this. So I'll be having a look at some of my older videos, and I would say that the video that I made about Bernie, I totally predicted this. But then, after seeing how terrible Trump was, and all the polls and stuff, I backed off that, and I guess I probably got kind of complacent. And then I had that video looking at the polls, and I was completely wrong. So I'm going to be talking about that. So that should be fun.
Yeah, I guess I
was right a while ago, and then I was wrong. So
yeah, and it was like I've been saying, I think what it really comes down to is that we thought it was about which of these people was the worst person, which is obviously Trump. That's not what the election was actually about at all. It wasn't about which of them was the more terrible person. It was about which of them, what each person represented. And one person represented change, and the other person represented the establishment, and that's really what it came down to.
Yeah.
It didn't even matter at all what the kind of person Trump was. All that matters is what he represented.
Right. If you go back in my channel, if you go back on my channel and watch my video, Let's Talk Bernie Bros, which was in May. What are we at now? May, June, July. So that was 5 months ago. I pretty much say that they're sort of handing the election to Trump, and I think it was after Bernie lost.
By them, do you mean the Democratic establishment or left-wing voters, or who? Who do you mean?
Mostly the Democratic establishment, like by fucking over Bernie and just saying she's not a good candidate and she's corporatist and she's all this kind of stuff. And I got some pushback from people on the left, and I said, like, basically Trump has a real shot of winning now. That was 5 months ago. And then, as I said, I slowly backed off that and then started being more like, oh, Trump sucks, he's going to lose. So
yeah, well, one of the real hallmarks of this whole election has been the real distance, the distance between what, in the eyes of someone in the establishment, either the media or the DNC machinery or whatever, what makes a good candidate is not the same as what a voter thinks makes a good candidate.
Yeah. Totally.
Especially, what by voter I mostly mean independent voters, but also to a degree the people in the actual parties as well. So yeah, I think they thought Hillary's a good candidate from our point of view for X, Y, and Z reasons, and those are not the reasons that the people actually give a shit about. That she's not a good candidate, and even though she might have been a good candidate from their point of view, she objectively wasn't in the eyes of the people.
Yeah.
And yeah. And that disconnect, like what makes America not a functional democracy, that staggeringly bad difference between public policy, public opinion, and what gets passed in the legislatures. You know, that's supposed to be basically the same in a real democracy. They're supposed to be similar, those numbers. But they're really not.
There's some statistic that says how much public desire for things influence the policies that actually passed.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, there's some statistic on that, and it was like minuscule. It was like very tiny.
That's not new. That's been a consistent result for decades in America. That's what Chomsky bases his assertion that America is no longer a democracy anymore.
Did you see that?
Because that number has to be at least similar.
On Twitter, someone posted a Chomsky quote from, I think, 2000 or something, where he said. Where he said the moment that they have a populist, charismatic person with a singular message is when all of the establishment people will just be like totally washed away, and then we'll be in real trouble in this country. And that's in 2000. And a lot of people are saying like, well, he basically just predicted Trump. So, you know,
he's a sharp dude, you know.
Yeah.
And that brings me to what the other thing I really wanted to talk about, which is the whole our previous views of what America was like and how they might have changed over the years, and now because when I was in my early 20s and I was going through the whole phase of like reading the kinds of people that you read in your early 20s if you're vaguely on the left, Chomsky,
Nietzsche.
Yeah, all of them. Yeah. I read Thus Spake Zarathustra around that time, and Beyond Good and Evil as well. Yeah. So yeah, like 10 years ago, I was in my early 20s. I had a more realistic idea of what American society is like than I had yesterday, basically. If it was 10 years ago, I would have been, yep, Trump will win. I would have known. But I lost that over the years, and I don't know why, but I think it had to do with Obama. Because during the Bush administration, I was very realistic about what America was really like. And now I think because of Obama and his being voted in twice, even though there was all that horrible backlash on the right with all the racist shit and all that, I think it just gave me unjustified hope.
You know, but I remember, like, you know, you and me and our group of friends when like teenagers and early 20s and stuff would just gather around the computer and watch Daily Show clips of George Bush being a moron, and would just laugh. And we'd just be like, and then we'd just be all like, America is so stupid. And there's so many stupid people in America. It's such a country. It's so uneducated. Whatever. And then when Obama came along, a lot of that kind of just went by the wayside. And it was like, I think people developed a much more charitable view of Americans. Like, they're doing their best, they're trying, blah, blah, blah. And then with Trump coming along, it's kind of like the Bush years kind of like creeping back in. And now we're all going to be sitting around being disgusting liberals, laughing about how fucking dumb America is all over again. So it's back.
Yeah, but I don't know. This seems darker to me than the Bush years. Maybe it's just because I'm older. I don't know.
Right.
I had a disconnect when I was in my 20s.
Because now you care. back in the day, it was just like we didn't give a fuck. We're just like, he's stupid.
I mean, I empathize with the left wing, you know, the people who would vote for a progressive candidate in the United States, because I knew there were still some of them, even though the third way had taken over the left. I knew that there were progressives there, and I felt bad for them, and you know, like minorities and all that. But
I wanted Bush to lose.
There was a disconnect. My point is, there was a disconnect in my mind at that point. I did feel bad for them. I felt empathy and compassion and all that, but there was a disconnect that basically meant that I was realistic about their chances of anything actually getting better. You know, you can feel bad for people in America, but you also have to be realistic about the chances of that changing. And if anything, it's going to change for the worse. So that's why on Twitter last night I put out stuff about maybe consider moving to another country, and if you can consider New Zealand if you're an American, because I really do think the situation is fucked, and that I respect people who want to stay and fight, but at the same time I respect people who want to get the fuck out of there and think it's a doomed fuckhole. And you know, because that's what I would have said 10 years ago, that it was a doomed fucking shithole.
But I mean, when I think about this election, with all the Pepe and the memes and all, like, you know, sort of turning white nationalism, racism, sexism, bigotry, etc., all of those like SJW buzzwords, turning all of those into jokes and memes that are just funny and quaint. I think back to the way that I thought when I was younger, because right now I'm 32, so I'm an old man. When I was in my 20s, a lot of the shit that I saw Bush doing, a lot of it was just like lulz. It was just funny. It was just like, whatever, yeah. But now that I'm older, I can see this actually impacts people, and this actually matters and actually affects like just working class people and families and the economy and their healthcare. And I can connect those issues a lot more to real people. Whereas back in the day, it was a lot more like, this is a game and it's just silly, whatever. So I think a lot of the younger people who are supporting Trump, they might have a similar mentality, like it's just kind of a game. That's why everyone's celebrating like SJW tears and stuff. And look at all the salt on Twitter. Like they can't see the connection between this guy becoming president and how it will impact people's lives, because it's like they're not at that point where they can see that.
I don't think that's down to memes. I think that's an element of human nature, and that's always been the case.
No, the memes don't drive it. The memes are just a reflection of it. Like they're a reflection of that kind of culture of like, it's just the lulz, dude. Chill.
One thing I would say is that while the mainstream, while the establishment media is still definitely a cog in a propaganda machine in America, the bizarre thing about the American propaganda system has always been the best in the world. Hitler admitted to that.
It's the greatest.
Hitler admired American propaganda systems and stuff, and said, and was I mean, he didn't. The one thing Chomsky brings up is that when you are a fascist, you don't need to have effective propaganda. You can use force. So they just round people up and shoot them and stuff, which you can't do so easily in a democracy. So you have to use propaganda instead. You have to brainwash people, change their minds on things, put out misinformation, all that.
Yeah, that's
why America got so good at it. And these days, the bizarre thing about things like memes is that basically people are doing it for themselves now. You don't even need to do it anymore.
It's like DIY propaganda, really.
That's why I think the alt-right is the real key to this whole Trump thing, because they do it on a grassroots level. They put out the propaganda, and you don't even need an establishment to do it anymore. They just do it for you. But I do think the dangerous as fuck thing about the alt-right, I think.
But at the same time, I think it is a reflection of what they value, and to me, it's more of a simplistic mindset of a kind of us versus them thing.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, and so I think the memes often just reflect people's values, where they think, I don't really care who gets hurt. It's just fun, funny, whatever. And some of them are just legitimate, straight up Nazis. But that's another conversation. Some of them are just like actual fucking dudes sitting, or like, well, not really, but maybe sitting around in their KKK robes, like doing fucking memes. But a bunch of other people are just like, this is lulz. I don't really care about the real world implications or consequences. I just want to like fucking tweak people. Yeah. So there's a whole range.
It's impossible to know how much of that there is, and how much it's like that divide between trolls putting out shit on feminist pages and people who are legitimately scary anti-feminists and stuff. Like you can never know. how much you can know, like, for, in some cases, like that particular guy is definitely for real because this thing he said is not the kind of thing a troll would say. You can do that, but on a macroscopic level, on a quantitative level, you can't know exactly how much of that, like, so I don't know. I generally don't like talking about that because it seems very conjectural to me. But
well,
you know,
I treat people differently based on how seriously they're talking about something. So if someone's just like, lols, the Holocaust about the Jews and the blah blah blah, I'm like, well, that's like pretty fucked up and sick and stuff, but you seem kind of just you're fucking around, so I'll give you a bit more of the benefit of the doubt, even though I think you're a moron. But if they're like seriously trying to make an argument that something about the Holocaust and all that shit was good, then I'm kind of like, no. Get the fuck away from me.
Part of me thinks the first guy is just the second guy 5 years earlier, you know? That the first guy making the joke will be the guy doing the serious, crazy political stuff in a few years.
I can't read people's minds and souls. I need them to just tell me, like, yeah, I think Hitler was good and Holocaust is whatever, and I hate the Jews. I'm like, all right, well, you're scum. Fuck off. Don't talk to me.
Yeah,
they're just lolling around. I'm like, well, you're a douche, but I'll tolerate.
There is also such a thing as bad trolls, people who don't know how to troll properly and would say something that appears to be just straight up people thinking that, but actually is just someone trolling really badly. Is that.
Trolls don't often tend to go into actual argumentation about things. So if somebody starts making actual argumentations about, like, praising white supremacy or Nazi Germany or something, generally that's a good indication that that person is not a troll and they're serious and actually
they won't go into
that stuff, you know.
They won't go into
sometimes.
They won't go into sophisticated argumentation, but they will push back, like just the same way a real person.
They'll start making an actual genuine argument, and then at that point I'm like, you're fucked. You're no longer like just some stupid idiot who's annoying. You're an actual, like, hideous piece of shit. Fuck off. Anyways,
but yeah, like when I was in my 20s and I was a bit, and I would have considered, like, if someone had put the phrase anti-American on me, in terms of the government, I would have probably accepted that description. You know, when you're reading a lot of this stuff that just makes the American government, it makes you realize how fucked up the American government really is. I mean, and you know,
and just how much more fucked up it's about to get too. So,
and you know, to a degree, in a democracy where people vote, you have to put at least part of that on the people that voted for those people to get into power in the first place, right? So it isn't just a reflection of the government; it's also a reflection of the people to a degree, and specifically the independent people for the most part. And so when you look at those people, those are the kinds of people who would elect a guy like Trump, but they also elected a guy like Obama, you know, the whole yes, we can thing.
Right.
Which, and that, I think, yeah, I got real deluded by the Obama thing about how because, you know, he didn't end up being a change guy in the end, but that's how he presented himself in 2008. And that gave me hope. And then the Bernie thing again gave me even more. But then, of course, that shattered when he was screwed over by the DNC in the media.
There's something difficult about Obama in that he was not a change candidate, and he did not, like, achieve or do a lot of the stuff that he talked about doing, and he compromised constantly, and he watered down everything by continually just being like, we have to work with the conservatives closely so they can make this more corporate and not help the people as much. You know, basically he did that all the time. But by the same token, he has turned around the economy, and the economy has started improving. And Obamacare is like a Band-Aid on something that needs something a lot more significant, that needs stitches or something. But it's something. It's like, it's better than nothing, basically. Well, anything's better than nothing. It's much better than nothing. But so he's done some good stuff, and he's also done the horrific drone wars and everything. But because there was such high expectations placed on him, it's easy to lose perspective of how much worse it's going to be when Trump comes in and just basically undoes all the gains. So
yeah, and if you think about, like, the first 2 years of Obama's first term, when he had a democratically controlled Congress, they got a lot of good shit done.
Oh, did they? They did this shit. Okay.
They did get a lot of good shit done, yeah. They didn't get as much stuff done as they said they were going to. They didn't close Guantanamo, and there was a few things he failed to do that he said he was going to do. And he definitely could have got more done, but he didn't realize, like, he didn't have like mind future reading powers. He wasn't a psychic, and so he didn't know that secret meeting had been held, which the Republicans basically agreed that if they took over the House or whatever, that they would be as obstructionist as possible for a House, a Congress to be. They would just take that as far as you possibly can. He didn't know that. So he was like,
but I remember that time, and everybody's favorite news outlet or / most hated, TYT. I remember Jink talking about that and being like, we've been fucking telling you this for like a year already, that they're going to do this. They're not going to work with you. They hate you. They're never going to help you. What? And you're still surprised. What the fuck is going on?
Obama he was naive when it comes to working with the other side, and that has been a hallmark of the third way. But
I remember
part of it because the third way is a centrist group. Because they're further towards those, closer to the guys on the right. Then they're not close to the guys on the right, obviously, but because they're closer to the guys on the right than the progressives are, like older progressive candidates for the Democratic Party, like what's his name? The guy who had this. No. What's that? Sorry.
I said Jimmy Dore. No.
No. I'm terrible at the moment, but the guy who put the solar panels on the White House and was the last progressive.
Oh, Jimmy Carter.
Jimmy Carter, yeah. Like those people, those kinds of guys and their voters were still around, but the third way had taken over, and the third way is good for some things, but terrible for other things. And yeah, like I don't know, like I guess people thought Obama was a progressive candidate when he was really just a third way establishment guy. And that fact that he was a third wayer is why he was doing all that compromise shit, because that's what the third way is like. They're close, they're into all that not being just on the left thing, because they're centrists, and that has led to being a very naive, because the right, if that was just in a vacuum, then fine, but the right at the same time is also moving further to the right. You need to understand that, and that's why the compromise thing would have never worked, because they were also moving further and further away from being reasonable. And by the time Obama came around, they were totally. It was the Tea Party was happening around then. That was when it was starting. There was some pretty fucking big clues that the right was no longer reasonable in America.
Well, I remember the thing that made me become completely disillusioned with Obama for quite a long time, and for a period of 3 or 4 years, I was basically just like, fuck Obama. He's useless. And it was around the time that he was doing that tax deal with the Republicans, and the Republicans wanted to make all these like tax cuts permanent and all this crap. I can't remember the exact tax deal. And they talked about it for like a day or two, and then Obama came out and said, we've reached a compromise and we're going to just do what the Republicans want to do with the tax thing. And then and there was like a two weeks from there was like the deadline for figuring this out, and like 2 weeks early he just like capitulated after like a day or two. And then the person was like, and this is on record, so you can go back and check it, and the journalist was like, well, why did you just give up now? Like, the negotiations only just started. And he's like, well, I could grandstand and I could just hang around and be like, oh, look at me, I'm so ideologically pure, I'm actually trying to do things, and but that's not going to help anybody, so I might as well just give them the tax cut. And I was just like, what the fuck? like how do you expect to actually achieve anything without fighting? You just give up like right away. You're like, you guys win. And it's like, he doesn't put any political pressure on them. He doesn't try to negotiate a better deal. He doesn't try to like use the bully pulpit. He's just like, okay. And I was like, this is not the guy who he said he was going to be. This is just a pathetic milquetoast third way whatever president. This is pathetic.
Yeah, his 2008 campaign was false in a way. It was to a degree lies. He wasn't that guy.
He literally just gave up on like the second day. I remember watching that and I was just amazed. I was like, this is the guy.
I think he was a good president, but he wasn't the guy he said he was going to be in 2008. It's just
he just let the conservatives just trample all over him, to be honest. So.
Yeah, but I mean, he did that because that's what his ideology leads to. You know, it's one of the things. And yeah, they're good at getting people out of
compromise, basically.
They're really good at things like turning around an shitty economic situation. Clinton did that very well. Obama did that quite well. That's what the third way is good at. One of the things.
But that's kind of a long-term thing. That takes a while. So it was a few years so people could see, like, oh, like, because I remember when the economy wasn't turned around, everyone was just whining and whining, like, the economy, blah, blah, blah. And all of us at the time, I think, were reasonably saying, you know, look at the situation he was given. He has to work to turn this around. And then it started turning around, and everyone was like, but it's not turning around fast enough. It's like, fuck all of you. It's turned around. Can't you just give them some fucking credit? And they're like, no, now we want to bring in Trump and go back to decline. Yeah,
but that is what I was going to say, is that the whole third way doing economic recovery thing, well, that actually, in a way, even though it's a good thing just on a ground level for like making people's lives not so shit, like, so it's a good, like, I'm not going to say saving the economy is a bad thing. Obviously it's a good thing, but it has a bad side to it, which is that it enables the fucking bullshit the Republicans do. And you can see that, like, Reagan just fucking shat the bed with the economy and left it in a fucking disaster area, because that's what the Republicans do. They cut taxes, which leaves a massive budget crisis, which they fill by borrowing tons of money, which they can't pay back, and then they don't pay it back, and it leaves.
And yet they still say that that's kind of like glory years, because it's kind of like everyone was high on the hog at the time, therefore the horrific hangover, no big deal.
Yeah, what they say is that they don't like the government doing so much spending. That's not true. They love government spending. They just want it to come from a different source than Democrats. They do way more government spending than the Democrats do, but they don't take it from taxes when they do it. They take it from borrowing money, which they don't pay back.
If you compare Republican and Democratic presidents on the economy, it's just such an absurd contrast. I don't understand how anyone could ever support conservatives on the economy, because they wreck it every time.
Yeah, and it's because their optics are the opposite of what they actually do. They say the opposite of what they do. They say that big government's bad and that large amounts of government spending is bad and all that, but they don't mean that. They don't believe that. But it gets believed.
Trump is going to fuck up the economy, but then people will stop valuing job numbers and economic growth and just make excuses, so it won't matter.
Trump's going to be big government as fuck. He's going to increase spending tons from what Obama did. If he's anything like any other recent Republican, that's what he's going to do. And from everything I've seen, makes me think he will be just the same.
Well, I think, look, I got a lot of things wrong, but I can guarantee you he's going to do badly on the economy, because they always fucking do, unless he doesn't cut taxes as much as he said he would, and he actually does surprising amounts of investment in. See,
that's the thing, is that the Republican economic view is not to be good. They don't try to be good on the economy, because what we mean by when we say good on the economy is that for the entire of the society. They don't care about that. They want to be good on the economy for certain elements of society, and they don't factor in the rest. In fact, some of them intentionally want to fuck over the rest, but not all. I think that's pretty extreme. I think most of them just don't give a fuck. So someone like Romney, for example, he wanted to be really good on the economy for large corporations and billionaires and stuff, but he didn't even care about being good or bad on the economy for everyone else. And some comments he made make you think that he actually hated the middle class and wanted to fuck them over. But that wasn't necessarily reflected in his actual policy positions. But yeah, he definitely was favoring. So when we say good on the economy, we're really talking about two different things. The Republicans are good on the economy for what they want to be good on, and nothing else.
Well, I think the thing with Trump is that he was much better at paying the economy lip service just in his stupid speeches, and people liked that. But for all intents and purposes, he's pretty much. Well, I don't know exactly how his policies stack up to Romney, but I know that it's just a similar kind of.
Their tax policies are similar. Yep, similar. I think that word is very justified.
Right, but Trump was very good at just saying we're gonna have fabulous this. I'm gonna have so much job growth. We'll have so many jobs you won't know what to do with it and stuff. And he was just good, just continually saying that kind of garbage, so people don't even give a fuck that he's got the same tired, broken conservative policies in the economy. And I mean, like, unless he does different than the plans that he's put out, it's an absolute guarantee that the economy is going to decline. But like so many of these middle to lower class, you know, often white voters have kind of just damaged themselves and been like, hey, corporations, take my money. And it's like, I don't know why they're celebrating, and they've hurt their own healthcare, and they've just hurt a lot of stuff about their own lives, and they're celebrating. And it's just like, I mean, I know I shouldn't feel bad for some of you because a lot of you are just total scum fucks. But another chunk of you, I just think like it sucks that you basically voted to damage your own life. And I guess you can celebrate that, but I don't see it as something really fun to celebrate. But okay, you can take a victory lap about hurting yourselves, you know. I mean, I saw an awesome meme that was just like this guy stabbing this other person, and the person doing the stabbing was the person being stabbed was America, and the person doing the stabbing was just a person that said themselves on that other person. And then the America person is like, why? It's like, oh, great, self-inflicted wound. Good job.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing with Americans. They vote against their own interests a lot, but it's because of a propaganda machine being so effective.
Right. And by against their own interests, we mean just things that will actually help them.
Yeah, like getting voters to think about things like abortion rather than like the economy and, you know, social mobility and all that kind of stuff, and the collapsing middle class, and, you know, diverting attention away from the things that matter to, like, you know, surface social issues that I'm not saying they don't matter, but they're just they're like a distraction from, you know, the things that actually impact the most people the most. Yeah, like in a utilitarian sense. Yeah. So yeah, I think I've pretty much covered what I wanted to say on it. What about you?
Well, I think so. I'm gonna make a video on it too.
Yeah,
and give myself credit and then take that credit away.
Yeah, I'm not going to abandon, I'm not going to totally disconnect myself from thinking anything good about the United States, but I think I'm just coming back to being a bit more realistic about my views about the chances of, I think Obama and Bernie made me think that progressivism has a shot at coming back in America, but nah. No.
Oh, well, I mean, at the very least, with Bernie, although he didn't have the chance to actually display that, you know, it seems like he was genuine about that. But we do know with Obama that a lot of that was just sort of talking points. So there is some kind of will or movement for progressivism, and I think Bernie does encapsulate that in many ways, but obviously that kind of message was downplayed and undermined, and instead we got like Hillary Clinton, and she's failed. So there you go. But Obama, he didn't quite live up to all of that progressive shit he was going on about.
True, but one thing we didn't actually talk about that we thought we might in this hangout, the one thing that we haven't covered yet, is the whole, no, Bernie wouldn't have beaten Trump either because he was a socialist thing. Should we talk about that?
CNN argument.
Well, more than CNN. I've seen, you and I have seen certain people say that a lot.
Right.
And,
well, yeah, I mean, back during the primary, a lot of Hillary supporters just seemed to be on the defensive about Hillary as a person. And it seemed to me a lot of the time they just sort of lashed out because of that. So they'd start flinging accusations around, and a lot of that was like, socialism isn't going to work, socialism's going to fail. And a lot of the time they weren't really substantive arguments, to be honest. It was just kind of like, we must protect Hillary.
Yeah, a lot of it was dancing around the fact that Hillary's unfavorables were so high, you know?
Yeah, and then you'd sort of bring up Wall Street and the speeches and the fact that like she's kind of a corporate shill, and
the reasons for the unfavorables being so high. Well, part of the reason, yeah.
And that she's not very trustworthy, which is still a fact. Like, people just didn't really believe her for a lot of stuff she said, because it's just flip-flopped a lot. She didn't support gay marriage until 2013, which I think is quite amazing, because I mean that's
not
pretty
she didn't support
recent.
it publicly.
Yeah, but that's insanely recent. I mean, Jesus Christ, it took you that long. And for a lot of those reasons. And so you talk about that stuff, and then they would just sort of completely sidestep it and just be like, socialism doesn't work, and you're dreaming, and you're misogynist, all this shit. And then you're Bernie bro.
Yeah.
Like, Jesus.
I mean, this argument is impossible to have, because either way it went, we would only have one case study out of the two necessary to make the comparison. Right? You can't have a race between Bernie and Trump and a race between Hillary and Trump. The one we got was Hillary and Trump. So that's the one we know how it went. And we don't know how a Bernie versus Trump race would have gone, except for the evidence provided by those matchup polls during the primaries. Beyond that, we don't have anything except speculation and conjecture. But you know, I think
there's one variable, though, which is that if the entire kind of establishment media machine was working overtime to discredit and undermine Bernie, that could definitely hurt his chances if he had actually won and been in the general. Like, just the fucking torrent of negative attacks on him, it would have been like very overwhelming.
Well, for one thing, you're making an assumption that it would have continued at the same level in the general that it did in the primaries, which I don't know is necessarily an assumption you can make. I think you could make an argument that the media likely would have softened up on Bernie a lot in the general because of Trump. They might not. Maybe they would have been even worse. Who knows? But there's a chance.
But we do know that when they run these kind of simulations, there's so many moving parts and variables that they can't really take into consideration. I think that's part of the reason that so much of the polling was wrong this time around, because there's like so many things they can't factor in.
I think the polling was wrong because people weren't honest. That's why.
Yeah, but that's a variable, though, isn't it? That's a big variable.
Yes, but that's the variable that matters. When polls turn out bullshit, that's almost always why, because the people weren't honest.
Right. And I think Nate Silver tried to work something like into his model for that, but I was reading about how Nate Silver did his models, and
but he might have done the same thing with the whole secret Hillary voter thing people were going on about, which turned out to be non-existent.
I know, but I think when you're dealing with something so complex, at a certain point, after you've added so many variables, it's like it sort of just becomes a gloop. It's just kind of meaningless now, because it's just too much in the fucking pot. You know, this could happen, or that could happen, or this could happen, or that could happen. I mean, yeah. I guess that's why it's done in percentages. Like, there's a whatever percent chance Hillary will win. Like, it could be like 90% chance. And did say like a lot of them were like 98% chance Hillary's going to win. And it's like, well, you done fucked up. 2% was bigger than you thought it was.
In the morning, I believe New York Times was still putting it at 85% Hillary was going to win.
Right. Well, it turns out that 15% was potentially a lot bigger than you thought it was. So
not potentially, factually.
Well, I don't know, because if it's just percentages, maybe just flukily the 15%. No.
That's not how numbers work.
Yeah, I know. But no, anyway, actually, they were just fucking wrong.
It is to the extent that not everyone votes, but they do vote. They do poll likely voters, so that's how it works. Right. The academics know that, so they work that into their. If
there's a secret voting block, that is such a big variable that it just makes your entire model totally fucking meaningless. So
that seems to be what happened this year. Yeah.
Unless you can find that voting block and quantify it in a realistic way, but that sounds very difficult to do.
Yeah, people that were going on about the secret Trump voters, it was all conjecture and speculation, and it had no data basis. It was all guesswork. It turned out to be correct, but they didn't have any data really that I know of. Maybe they did. I don't know. I didn't see it.
Well, I think like for all the liberal tears and progressive tears and SJW tears and the salt on Twitter, that there's one person who's the most sad, and that's Nate Silver. So,
yeah, he's pretty screwed at this point.
He has the biggest level of salty tears in the entire world at this moment, to be honest.
Yeah.
Poor guy.
So anyway, so we can't know for sure how Bernie versus Trump would have gone, but we do know how Trump versus Hillary went. how Bernie versus Trump. Yeah. Anyway, so I don't know if I phrased that wrong. I can't remember. But so we do know how Trump versus Hillary went down, so we can look back at that and say that some of the things that the Hillary supporters were saying during the primaries about the election didn't turn out to be accurate, like the fact that it was going to be an election about who was the most terrible person, therefore Hillary would win because she's not as bad as Trump, which is not what the election turned out to be about at all.
Wow.
So, you know, that's why I think that Bernie would have done better, because it turned out to be about the outsider versus establishment thing. And you can't play that card against Bernie. He is an outsider. He's more of an outsider than Trump is.
But that's the thing. I think you can have both. So I think Hillary only ran half a campaign. She just ran the half of like Trump's shit. But there's a whole other half of like aspirational message. And that was
it's not like a Bernie campaign wouldn't have run negative ads on Trump. They probably would have, you know.
Plus aspirational message, though.
I think they may have run less negative ads on Trump, which may have been a good thing, you know. So,
well, I think a whole campaign would be made up of attacking Trump and then providing something for people to vote for. And
yeah, and Bernie
Hillary,
does that on his own. You don't even need to cook anything up with Bernie. He just does it.
Right. So it's like we only had 50% of a campaign running. The rest of it was just like sort of not there. So.
Yep. And Bernie knew what ground game was and was doing all that stuff in the early primary states. So there's no reason to think he wouldn't have run a decent campaign from the technical, you know, sort of the gears, the machinery element of it. I think he probably would have run as good a campaign as Hillary in that regard. You know, he seemed to be good at picking people and stuff. Although some of the people he picked weren't so great, but I think most of his surrogates and stuff seem to be all right.
Right. But I also think, I mean, obviously, much else that we're going to talk about is just going to be I can't say this, what-ifery. Because
but I guess
like, this could have happened.
My main contention, though, is that the whole socialist thing wouldn't have been as big a deal as some people would have you believe, with regard to the comparison between the drawbacks that Hillary had.
Right.
You know, there were people that all those chants at the RNC led by Chris Christie of lock her up and all that shit. Like that, you can't tell me that is not worse or not. Okay. You can't tell me that is better or not as bad as the socialist charge, you know, having crowds of people chanting lock her up.
Yeah.
That's bad. You know, that's just as bad as being called a socialist is, if not worse.
And also the entire WikiLeaks variable, unless there's some kind of fucked up thing that Bernie was up to we don't know about, that would have just not been there. So
exactly, yeah, it wouldn't have mattered. Yep, the James Comey thing wouldn't have happened.
Well, I mean, maybe WikiLeaks just would have kept bashing Hillary just for the fuck of it, but no one would have cared because they feel like she's not running.
Yeah, and I guess we also need, like, nobody knows for sure how much of a role the FBI thing played. There are people that I've seen commentators saying that was like the big deal. That was the deciding factor. It might have been, you know, could have easily been.
My feeling is that was just part of a stew of shittiness. That was just like part of the mix.
The timing of it being so close to election day being the thing,
right?
Not the nature of the scandal, the timing of it.
I can't say for sure whether that's the thing that tipped the scales.
No, nobody can.
Can't either. So, yeah.
Yeah, but I think, you know, there's a good chance that was a major thing, and that would not have happened with Bernie. That's the thing. At the socialist charge, there would have been some stuff, probably some stuff that came out about Bernie's past, about him doing community organizing, activism, that sort of all that stuff that the right wing likes to paint during the 60s or whatever. But would that have really been that big of it? You know, I'm trying to think of like controversies that could have derailed Bernie. There doesn't seem to be. Everybody knows the socialist thing. That's not a wild card. That's a constant. You know, once you deal with that in the debates and at the start of the campaign, and
he's too old.
You can't really go anywhere with that. He is old. That's true.
There you go. Scandal.
But, you know, Trump not young.
Not good.
You know, Trump's only a few years younger than him.
But there's no problem there, trust me.
Is Trump going to be the oldest president ever? I think. Is he? I think he is, right?
Don't know.
I don't know.
Hillary's pretty old too. They're all old.
They are all old. They were all old.
Fucking old people. Ruining everything for all of us.
That's the lesson learned. Old people are bad. That's the.
And destroy the internet.
So yeah, okay, yeah, like you said, if we're gonna keep talking about this, it is basically not a lot more than speculation and conjecture. So we should probably cut that off there. And yeah, so in that case, I think I've probably said all I wanted to say, and we could probably wrap this up. What do you think?
Sure. I think I've probably run out of stuff for now. So
I'm sure I'll think of it like 5 or 6 things I was thinking of saying last night after we end this, but you know, it's always the way. Oh, one thing I should say is that I've got I should just let my viewers know what's going on with the Q&A video. It's still coming. It will come out. It's just taking me ages, and I'll explain why in the video, but yeah, it's coming.
And also to all my liberal friends, please try not to despair. Don't turn to drugs and alcohol. You have a lot to live for. You matter to me, and just we're gonna get through this. Okay.
You can get free healthcare in our country without even being a citizen or even a resident. If you just come here, we'll patch you up.
And we'll give you a hug.
It's not that hard to move here and immigrate here, and there's job opportunities, and so
we'll take care of you. I'll build a shelter for wayward Americans.
There's more places to move than just Canada, is what I'm saying. Don't overload the Canadians too much.
Well, Justin Trudeau, he loves immigrants and stuff, so he'll be there with open arms. Like,
I assume you heard about how the Canadian immigration website crashed last night.
Yeah, but Justin Trudeau, who loves taking people in, he'll just be at the border, like with like a ring of flowers, like, "Welcome, brother. This is Canada. Come join the bongo circle."
If I was an American right now, I would be leaving. So that's why I'm putting out that information about the fact that you could potentially consider moving here because it's a nice place and we have.
Well, you can see I got these cupboards. You could stay in one of these. I'll just pop you in there. It's lovely. It's free.
I got a spare room. Yeah.
I got a couch. I got a bunch of cupboards. I got a couch. I've got. I think there's a door to underneath the house, so you stand there.
Yeah, you can fit a whole city.
Like hiding all these Americans in my house.
Oh dear. All right. Well, okay. Thanks everyone for watching, and thank you, Tim, for taking part. And
awesome. Someone said I'll take the cupboard. Wicked.
All right.
All right.
See you, everyone.
All right.